They mocked the janitor for 15 years, until she walked into the boardroom and fired the CEO. The mop glided across the marble floor with practiced ease, the rhythmic squeak echoing through the silent lobby like a hymn only she could hear. Most days, no one looked twice at her. Not when she emptied trash bins, not when she polished the glass doors to a mirror shine, not when she disappeared into the elevator that led to nowhere important. "Hey, mop lady," someone muttered behind her. Laughter followed. She didn't turn. She never did. For 15 years, Marlene Thomas swept through the headquarters of Carrion Logistics like a ghost, efficient, invisible, always on time. A black woman in her late 50s, with streaks of silver threading through her tight coils, and a quiet gaze that missed nothing. To the executives, she was background noise. To the workers, a fixture. Reliable, forgettable. But they never asked why she was always there. Never wondered why she worked double shifts, why she lingered near the executive suites, or why her phone occasionally buzzed with encrypted notifications. Because what they didn't know, what they never even bothered to consider, was that Marlene wasn't just the janitor. She was the majority owner of Carrion Logistics, the co-founder, the silent partner, and for 15 years, she had been watching. They called it Carrion because it was built from nothing, just bones and willpower. Marlene remembered the early days like old gospel. Her husband Leon scribbling ideas on napkins at the kitchen table, her sewing uniforms at night to save startup costs, her voice steady as she negotiated their first warehouse lease because Leon hated haggling. They had built the company together. But the paperwork? That had been Leon's idea. "If anything ever happens to me," he'd said, "I want you protected. I want them to respect you, even if they never know why." When he died suddenly, cardiac arrest at 48, she had buried him quietly, endured the sympathy of board members who barely concealed their relief. A silent vote had shifted operational control to a new CEO, a man named Reed Penley. Reed had smiled at the funeral and emailed the lawyers before Marlene was home from the cemetery. Marlene never contested it. She let Reed believe she was just a grieving widow clinging to scraps. She signed what she needed to sign. But what she kept, what no one knew, was the majority stake in the company. 51%. Untouched. Untouchable. She put on the janitor's uniform 6 months later. Not because she needed the money, but because she needed the truth. At 3:17 a.m., when the offices were dark and only the hum of servers filled the air, Marlene made her rounds with a microfiber cloth and a body camera stitched into the hem of her vest. She saw the things no one thought to hide. Like the CFO's secretary, shredding documents late at night with trembling hands. Or the warehouse manager sneaking bonuses for his friends while denying overtime to single mothers. Or Reed Penley, leaning over the conference table, laughing about layoffs while sipping whiskey he kept in a drawer labeled Wellness Budget. Marlene watched, recorded, archived. The files lived in cloud servers she set up under a dummy name. Brick by brick, a digital ledger of arrogance, fraud, and rot. She noted how they treated the warehouse workers, many of them immigrants, many of them black and brown, as disposable bodies. No health coverage, no safety upgrades, just quotas and threats. Every time someone made a cruel joke in her presence, assuming she couldn't hear or wouldn't understand, she smiled gently and mopped the floor. Each insult, each injustice, was a thread she wove into a tapestry of reckoning. She didn't speak. Not yet. But she was listening. And they were running out of time. It was a Tuesday when Marlene heard the final straw fall. She was scrubbing the hallway just outside Conference Room B when she heard Reed's voice cut through the door like a whip. "She's been here forever and still can't speak proper English," he sneered. "Hell, if she disappeared tomorrow, nobody would notice." Laughter followed. A murmur of agreement. They weren't talking about Marlene, not this time. They were talking about Anita, a Guatemalan warehouse shift lead who'd injured her hand last week lifting a broken pallet. Instead of sending her to the doctor, they had written her up for improper lifting technique. Marlene felt her grip tighten on the mop handle. Her chest rose slowly, deliberately. She looked at the door, the faces behind it that she knew well. Men who'd built their power on other people's silence. That night, She returned home, peeled off her uniform, and stood before a mirror. She saw the lines of 15 years in her face, lines carved by restraint, by watching injustice without flinching. No more. She opened her closet and reached for something she hadn't worn in over a decade. A charcoal gray blazer, tailored for boardrooms, not break rooms. She smoothed it across the bed. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, we change the locks. Wednesday morning dawned gray and quiet. At 8:58 a.m., just as the board was gathering for its quarterly review, the glass doors of the executive conference room swung open, and every head turned. Marlene stepped inside, not in her janitor's uniform, not with a mop. She wore the blazer, crisp white blouse, slacks that whispered with every step. Her shoes echoed with the authority of someone who had every right to be there. The silence was immediate, thick. Reed Penley blinked, caught between confusion and annoyance. "Can we help you?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Marlene didn't answer. She moved to the head of the table, his seat, and placed a thin black folder on the polished wood. She sat, slowly, comfortably. Reed chuckled, but the laughter was hollow. "I think you're in the wrong meeting." Marlene met his gaze. Her voice, when it came, was low, even. "No, Mr. Penley. You are." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Eyebrows lifted. She opened the folder. Inside, ownership documents, board resolutions, her husband's founding paperwork, his signature and hers. Still valid. Still binding. "Let me be clear," she said, locking eyes with each of them. "I am Marlene Thomas, co-founder of Carrion Logistics, and I own 51% of this company." She closed the folder. "And I'm here to clean house." Reed's smirk cracked. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice had lost its spine. This is some kind of misunderstanding." Marlene slid a second document across the table, an audit of board activity, with timestamps, signatures, and copies of the power of attorney papers filed after Leon's death. "You pushed me out," she said, "but you never took me out. I never sold. I never signed my voting rights away. You assumed I didn't matter. You assumed wrong." A younger board member, Evan, leaned forward. "Wait, is this legitimate?" Marlene turned to him. "Would you like me to call the company's general counsel? She's already reviewed it. Or should I call the state regulator instead?" The room grew quiet again. Then she turned back to Reed. "For 15 years, I let you play emperor. I let you wear the crown and swing the axe. I watched you funnel contracts to your friends, deny fair pay to the people who kept this company alive, lie to investors, and bury safety complaints." Reed stood, his face red. "You can't just walk in here and fire me." "I can," Marlene said. "And I am." She looked at the security officer outside the door. "Please escort Mr. Penley out. He is no longer affiliated with Carrion Logistics." The guard hesitated, then stepped inside. Reed's jaw worked, but no words came. Marlene didn't flinch. 15 years of silence had bought her this moment. He was done. Word traveled fast, faster than freight, through Carrion's own logistics network. By lunchtime, the warehouse buzzed with rumors. "Did you hear? The janitor fired the CEO." Others dismissed it. "Come on, that's got to be a joke." Until they saw the security footage. Until they noticed Reed's office door stripped of his nameplate. And then they saw her. Marlene, not in coveralls, not pushing a cart, but walking through the floor in heels, her head held high, her face calm but unwavering. Forklifts slowed. Conversations stopped. One of the junior line managers muttered under his breath, "I called her Hey Mop Lady last week." She walked through the rows of pallets like she always had. Only now, people looked. People noticed. People wondered. That afternoon, she called a town hall meeting in the main loading dock, where workers had toiled through heat, injuries, and quotas that rose faster than their paychecks. They gathered in cautious silence. Waiting. Watching. Marlene stepped up onto a wooden crate. No mic. Just her voice. "I was one of you," she said. "And I still am." She paused, letting it settle. "But I also built this place, with my husband, with my sweat, with my belief that we could do better." She let the silence hang, then continued. "And starting today, we will." The applause didn't erupt. It started quiet, hesitant, but it grew. And when it did, it shook the rafters. That night, Marlene sat alone in the CEO's office, the one Reed had ruled from like a throne. She didn't sit in his chair. Not yet. She stood at the window, looking down on the loading docks, still glowing under floodlights. Workers moving, machines humming, life continuing. On the desk sat the flash drive she'd pulled from her locker that morning. Years of footage, emails, spreadsheets. Every lie they'd buried in back channels. Every budget cooked to look like efficiency. She plugged it into the office computer. One by one, she opened the files. Bonuses paid to executives while warehouse crews were denied hazard pay during the pandemic. Uninvestigated complaints of racial harassment. OSHA violations marked, resolved, with no action. Vendors overbilled and quietly rehired. She created folders, legal, media, internal repair. By midnight, she had a roadmap, not just for damage control, but for a rebuild. This wasn't just about justice. It was about transformation. Before she shut down the computer, she paused. On the desktop sat a picture Reed had framed years ago, him shaking hands with a state senator. She dragged the photo to the trash. Then, for the first time in 15 years, Marlene sat behind the CEO's desk, and it felt earned. By morning, the shock had turned into questions. The news hit the inboxes of board members, investors, and partners across 3 continents. Carrion Logistics announces change in leadership. Effective immediately, Marlene Thomas assumes full operational control as CEO and majority shareholder. The reactions were mixed: confusion, panic, denial. Reed tried to fight back with legal threats. Marlene had anticipated that. Her lawyers met his within hours and reminded him, on the record, that every move he'd made without board approval, every unethical payout, was now part of a formal investigation. He disappeared from the news cycle before he ever got a headline. Internally, Marlene called department heads into the boardroom, one by one. To some, she offered a second chance. To others, she offered the door. She listened more than she spoke. She asked questions no CEO had ever asked the mailroom manager. No owner had ever asked the cleaning crew. She held meetings with janitors, forklift drivers, call center workers. They were stunned. "You want our ideas?" One man asked, confused. "I want to rebuild this place with the people who've kept it running," she said. "We've been invisible long enough." And she meant it. The reckoning wasn't revenge. It was restoration. On the 3rd day of her leadership, Marlene held a press conference. She stood behind a simple podium in the warehouse loading dock, not a glass tower or velvet curtained hall, just concrete, forklifts, and the people who mattered. The media had caught wind of the story. Janitor turned CEO? Marlene Thomas, the quiet power behind Carrion Logistics. The buzz was electric. Cameras flashed. Journalists jostled for position. She stepped to the mic, her expression steady. "I didn't come here today to defend myself," she began. "I came to tell the truth." Then she told it, not as a spectacle, but as a record. She spoke of the founding days, of being dismissed after her husband's death, of returning in silence to watch the empire they built slip into arrogance and abuse. She spoke of the workers who had been mistreated, of the greed disguised as leadership, of the strength it takes to be underestimated and still choose observation over outrage until the moment arrives. Reporters were stunned. A CNN correspondent whispered into her mic. She really was the janitor. No, Marlene thought, but didn't say. "I was the owner who cleaned up your mess in plain sight." Her final words rang clear. Don't ever mistake a uniform for insignificance. Sometimes the janitor owns the building, and she's been watching all along. After the press conference, the ripple turned tidal. Shares stabilized, not because investors trusted the company, but because they trusted her. Marlene received messages from CEOs, janitors, union reps, interns, and retired founders. One message stood out. It was a handwritten letter from a woman named Clara who'd worked sanitation at a packaging plant in Ohio for 27 years. "They used to laugh when I said I had ideas, but now they're listening. Because of you." Marlene held the note for a long time. Meanwhile, the company began to transform, visibly. Executives started shadowing warehouse crews. HR replaced can policies with real accountability. The walls of the break rooms filled with multilingual posters outlining new safety rights. Pay discrepancies were audited. Benefits extended to part-time staff. A new initiative was launched, Carrying Voices, monthly roundtables for workers to lead conversations. Still, not everyone welcomed the change. Some long-timers quit. Others whispered that she was only trying to prove a point. She didn't argue. She just kept showing up, every morning, walking the floor, shaking hands, listening. Not above them, among them. It wasn't about titles anymore. It was about trust. And you don't earn that with power. You earn it with presence. 6 months later, the company's quarterly report looked different. Not just the numbers, though profits had stabilized, but the footnotes. One line read, employee turnover down 43%. Warehouse injuries down 67%. Engagement scores up 200%. But what stood out most was the cover page. A photo of Marlene standing arm in arm with a warehouse team. No suits. No hierarchy. Just people. She'd refused the glossy photo shoot. This is who we are, she said. Not a brand. A community. The board, now restructured with diverse and worker-elected seats, backed her vision. Investors who had once doubted her now praised her for turning the company into a case study in ethical transformation. But for Marlene, the greatest moment came quietly. One evening, as she walked past the janitor's closet she'd used for 15 years, she saw a young black woman, new, nervous, sweeping the lobby. Marlene paused. The woman looked up. "Oh, sorry. I'll get out of your way, ma'am." Marlene smiled. "You're exactly where you need to be." Then she handed her a sealed envelope, an invitation to the next leadership mentorship circle. The woman blinked. "But I'm just..." "No," Marlene said gently. "You're not just anything. You're potential. And I see you." On the 1-year anniversary of her return, Marlene stood outside the headquarters. A plaque had just been installed beside the main entrance. Not flashy, just bronze and bold. Carrion Logistics Headquarters. Founded by Leon and Marlene Thomas. Built with purpose. Run with dignity. Employees gathered around her. Some cheered. Others teared up. One of the younger managers asked, half joking, "So, what's it feel like to go from janitor to CEO?" Marlene smiled, hands clasped before her. "I never stopped being either." And she meant it. Because the truth wasn't about revenge or headlines. It was about a woman who swept more than floors. She swept through arrogance, corruption, and small-mindedness, and she did it with grace, strategy, and power they never saw coming. She didn't climb the ladder. She built the building, and she never once asked for a seat at their table. She brought her own. As the crowd slowly dispersed and she walked inside, someone new, young, just hired, held the door for her and said kindly, "Morning, ma'am." Marlene turned to him with a gentle nod. "No need for ma'am. Just call me Marlene." Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it mops, and listens, and waits. And when it speaks, the whole building listens. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.